In a continuation on my unit guide videos, we're going to be talking about Sturgia today. Now, in our previous one, we talked about the Aserai, going through the ins and outs of each individual tier of units and culminating with an overall kind of impressions of the current state of the Aserai in patch 1.4.1. Now, I am releasing this video and we're probably due for another patch any day now, but I do want to talk about some things before we jump into this video. For one, I have a new microphone, so if something sounds different or there's a lot of plosives or anything like that, please let me know in the comment section below so I can correct the recording as best as possible. Secondly, I was ranking all of the units and I was using a terminology that I think was a little confusing. So going forward for the rest of these guides, this one included here today, whenever I reference the tier of something, I'm referencing that unit's actual tier within the game. 2, 3, 4, 5, or in the case of the Noble line, tier 6. And I will rank them, I'll call it a ranking, of either low, mid, or high. And depending on which slot we're talking about, which tier we're talking about, sometimes that can be anywhere from 5 units to 6 units to sometimes even 7. Or in the rare case, maybe even 1 or 2. So if I give something a high ranking, it's pretty much because it performs not only above its peers, but exceptionally better than its peers. And a mid-rank ranking is because I'm saying something is doing pretty well, pretty average, not terrible, but not exceptional. And if I give something a low rank, then I'm saying that it is just outright awful. And I will support anytime I give any of these ranks, and you obviously will probably have some different opinions. But I did want to quickly go over this stuff before we jump into our unit video here on Sturgia, because that's going to be the format we're going to use going forward with talking again about the tiers and the ranks for each respective unit. And just like with our Aserai video, we will talk about the typical Sturgian line units across their just basic Sturgian recruit. And then we will talk about their noble line at the end of the video and how it would compare to other noble lines of similar use case. In this case, we're going to be talking about the Druzniks, which are a heavy cav selection, so they've got plenty of competition. Let's jump into the tier 2 of the Sturgian military. So here we are with the Sturgian warrior in tier 2, and you'll notice something different about this video than the other ones. I am using a mod from Little Tantan that is going to be using the equipment set mod. It allows me to see all the different loadouts for every single unit in the game. So this would give you a really good idea of what their armor is, what their individual items are, what their actual skill value grants them. So for instance, this character's got 41 handed. Well, that equates to 6% damage and 2.8% speed. So we can really drill down on the specifics of this rather than me talking about the metadata behind the scenes. And this kind of makes it a nice, easy presentation so that it's not too cluttered. But the Sturgian warrior is unfortunately one of the worst tier 2 foot soldiers in the game. And really, this comes down to 3 big reasons. Number one, it has very low tier weapons for other tier 2 units. Usually they've got a weapon tier of 4. Well, the Sturgian warrior has a mere weapon tier of 3, and that is quite terrible. In addition, they have very low body armor, with almost every other unit having at least 15 or 20 body armor, and the Sturgian warrior only having 7 in almost all cases, except for this one, where the scarf gets it an extra 2 body armor, and the helmet, or lack thereof, the Northern Roughhide cap, giving it a little bit more head armor. So you can see that the Sturgian warrior right out the gate suffers from a huge amount of deficit when it comes to its equipment. But I guess the only caveat here is that it does have an exceptionally good shield, probably the best shield in the tier 2 units of foot soldiers. So I would give the rank of the Sturgian warrior low, as it is pretty much damn near at the bottom. Moving over to the other tier 2 unit, we've got the Sturgian woodsman. Now there is only one other tier 2 javelin soldier in this class, and that is the Battanian woodrunner. And to be totally honest, the Sturgian woodsman just doesn't really compare. The woodrunner gets way better armor, has a nice assortment of both weapons and a shield and a throwing weapon, and it just has a very nice staying ability. But when I take a look at the Sturgian woodsman, we don't really see any of that. It's got a very limited loadout. with only one of them including a shield. In addition to that, it's not an archer. So while the Sturgian, while the Battanian Woodrunner does get the benefit of a noble line of archers, the Sturgian Woodsman is the first ranged unit in all of the Sturgian army, and it is just not great. It only gets 4 stacks or 4 shots of fish harpoons in all of its variations, so it has a very limited amount of range ability, period. And even its survivability, I mean, this kit is actually quite survivable because it has a matching kit with the Sturgian warrior, actually. But as a whole, you're going to see less of these progress to brigands and archers, or hunters in this case, than you would the Woodrunner progressing towards the skirmisher. So again, we're going to have to give the Woodsman a low rank as well. So right out the gate, Sturgia is starting to struggle with both a low tier 2 foot soldier and a low tier 2 quote-unquote ranged unit in the Woodsman. Well, let's jump over now to tier 3 and see how this might possibly shape up. So the third tier category is where Sturgia kind of gets a little bit more steam. Starting with the Sturgian soldier, we see a unit that had a big change in the more recent patches. I think 1.4.0 was the big overhaul to the Sturgian military, in which case the soldier saw a change to its armament. And actually that change is pretty huge, and it even affects the 4th tier that we'll talk about in a little bit. And you can see that his armor is now the leather armor with iron plates. This gives his total body armor of around 24. And one of the nice things about Sturgia, but also at the same time, one of the weak things about them, is that their units have a low amount of variety. This means that you have a pretty standard set of military units versus having a wide variety of things that you maybe don't want on a soldier, or a poor loadout possibly. So if we go through the different equipment sets, you're really only swapping out armor and a different shoulder piece with each one. And for the most part, it's a pretty nice, standard, good frontline soldier. So I would actually give the rank of this Sturgian soldier as high, because it has great armor, it has solid weapons in both the broad leaf-shaped spear and the Northern Common Axe, and on that note, it has an axe. Now, I did say with the Sturgian warrior, it has a low tier for its weapons, and that does kind of make it suffer. But if I look at the Sturgian soldier, having an axe is actually quite a nice addition here, because the Northern Rounds shield provides a lot of defensive cover, especially in a shield wall. And again, it has some great armor. But when I take a look at stuff like the Khazad Spearman, who has nice body armor, or even the Vlandian swordsman, we look at the Asarai footman, we look at the trained infantryman, we can see that there's a wide variety of high armor. But this variety tends to differ from unit to unit. Like, look at this one. This drops down to 16. This guy's armor drops to 14 here for his body armor. So there is a lot of deviation through some of the other tier 3. I'm sorry, this should be on the infantry soldier, not the swordsman. We'll go back to that in just a second. But there's a lot of variety on these different equipment indexes for some of the other tier 3 units that really make it so that the nice standardized Sturgian soldier armor really stands out. In addition to that, the axe is very good because it breaks shields. It has a little bit more reach, just slightly more than a mace, and it does a good amount of damage that will kind of carry over a little bit better than a mace in some situations. But at the same time, he can also be very good in sieges. I find the Sturgian soldier to be an exceptional tier 3 soldier unit. And just to take a look at the Vlandian infantryman, if I can show you that one real quick. If it actually wants to come up, there it is. So again, his body armor is only at 17, 15, 17. So you can see how the Sturgian soldier really shines here. Now, the Sturgian brigand is an interesting one here. There's only 3 other ranged javelin units in this class. We know that the Asarai gets their first range unit in tier 3, and the other one is the Battanian skirmisher, I believe. Now, of those 3, the Asarai one is terrible. We've already established that. That's the low rank. But the Sturgian brigand is at a mid rank here, and I'll tell you why. The fish harpoons are great because he gets 8 stacks, which is actually more than the Battanian skirmisher. If we're purely talking about range capability, the Sturgian brigand has more range capability than an actual Battanian skirmisher. He has an extra stack on top of him, so that allows him to do more range damage. But he has a terrible loadout by comparison. He has only a sword and a shield and very low armor. But if I look at the skirmisher, which I've actually used plenty of times, they have better armor, they have a western long spear, they get a nice axe as well. So they have a little bit more staying power, and I find that Battanian skirmishers move into veteran skirmishers and wildlings far easier than Sturgian brigands and Sturgian brigands do into hardened brigands. So, and I think the big reason behind that is because of that northern padded cloth. And it's the same thing. It goes, there's one other change here to the northern patterned gambeson, which is just 2 more body armor. So these guys can get killed way too easily versus, say, the Battanian skirmisher, which has almost the same armor as a trained warrior, and it can really hold the line a lot better and gets a nice spear, so it can actually do well against cavalry. So I find that the Sturgian brigand is a good mid-rank for tier 3 javelin unit. Now, the last unit in tier 3 for the Sturgians is the Hunter. And unfortunately, we're going to be dipping back to that tier 2 ranking that we talked about. The Sturgian Hunter, I got to rank as low. And the reason behind that is they have a weak bow and weak arrows. So all the other tier 3 archers either have a bad bow and good arrows, or good arrows and a bad bow. There's usually some kind of trade-off here. The Sturgian Hunter has both a bad bow and bad arrows, and it does get a minor bump up in its bow skill. It's got 10 more bow skill than almost any other rank. That only equates to, if I hover over right here, 0.9 more accuracy and 1.1% more damage. So it's really not going to do a whole ton. He's also got weak armor on top of it. I have to rank the Sturgian Hunter in that low bracket because it can't really hold its own by comparison to the other tier 3 archers. They just get better loadouts, better armor, and better all-around damage capability. Let's jump over to tier 4 though, because there are some big heavy hitters in tier 4 for Sturgia. Tier 4 for Sturgia is interesting because we're going to start with the Sturgian Spearman, and it's not going to be a happy tale. This is definitely ranked low, and you can see right out the gate why one of the biggest reasons it's ranked low is because the body armor value of the Sturgian Spearman across all 3 of its sets is lower than that of a Sturgian soldier. Remember, the Sturgian soldier with its plated leather was 24. This is 20. So the Sturgian Spearman already suffers out the gate. In addition, we get the same tier issue when it comes to the weapons that we've dealt with previous military tiers or unit tiers. This guy has a northern backsword that is tier 4 with 54 cut damage. There's one other index here that's got the pointy war sword that has 56 cut damage. That is 10 damage less than the worst weapon across all of the other tiers of all the other factions of tier 4 soldiers. And I think that other one is the Imperial Veteran Infantryman, who has a Spatha with 64 cut. But the rest, 73, you can see there. You can see 75 here on the Battanians. The long saber for the Khazate is 70. So even the Asrai have 72. So you get a unit that has got way less actual damage output when it comes to shred up melee. You get a broad leaf-shaped spear, which has been the same one from tier 3, and it's a weapon tier 2. The other ones get much better spears that can do way more damage. In addition, though, it does have the best shield and the large round shield, so I guess it's got that going for it. But right now, the Sturgian Spearman needs an overhaul. And really, all it needs is a swap of body armor alone to get it out of that low tier. Yeah, the damage output from the swords is another issue, but just simply having it not have armor worse than the previous tier is going to be a massive change to them. But moving over here to the Sturgian Berserker, we move now into the two-handed kind of weapon Shock Trooper. And the Sturgian Berserker is quite good. And we've talked about this before with the Asari, right? They get their Palace Guard line with the Mameluke Guard and the Mameluke Palace Guard. And then you also get the Falksmen, you get the Berserkers here, you get the Volgiers at the end of the Volandian line. But The Berserker is great, and one of the biggest reasons is because it's got great skills. 110 two-handed, it has 130 athletics as well, and 100 one-handed. So it is more than just simply a two-handed axe, well, Berserker. It has a lot of really great armor in addition to that, and that one-handed skill allows him to do more damage than, again, just that two-handed axe. Is he in a situation where he's sieging a wall? Is he up on the wall? Well, now he has a longsword that he can take advantage of that has less length on it, so he doesn't get stuck on the wall using that long sword. And no other two-handed weapon variant soldier gets that ability. They usually have, like the Falksman will have a throwing weapon, the Palace Guard gets the Executioner Axe, which is an exceptional two-handed axe, but the Berserker gets a nice long sword, or I guess a war sword in this case. The only other situation is the Manavliaton for the Imperial, which just has a juggernaut amount of armor. But the Berserker I would definitely rank as high. Another high-ranked unit here is the Sturgian Hardened Brigand. Now this is another pretty, I guess, small category in the tier 4 skirmish cav. The only other skirmish cav at this level is going to be the Ferris, which is part of the noble line for the Aserai. So it is the best tier 4 non-noble line skirmish cav. And when I say skirmish cav, I'm just saying a cavalry unit that focuses on using javelins to do a lot of its damage, but also has the ability to do melee damage. That's what I call skirmish cav. But one of the little, I guess, caveats to this as well is that he does have a pretty terrible horse. This is a tier 2 Sturgian trotter, which is very slow at only 44 speed. So getting a bump up in a horse here would make the Hardened Brigand a little bit more terrifying on the battlefield, because outside of that, he's actually really devastating. He gets 10 stacks of woodland javelins, which I think one of these switches over to a... I thought one switched over to a fish harpoon, but I think that's the horse raider. But these woodland javelins are tier 6, 96 piercing on them, so they do a lot of damage. He can actually do nice close combat damage with this northern backsword. Doesn't have the longest reach, so he'll be better in a cavalry engagement and less so on a cav on an infantry engagement. But still, I think that the Hardened Brigand is high ranked, not just because it's the only one in its category, but comparing it even to a Ferris. A Ferris is a little bit more of a mounted knight with javelins, and it only gets 1 stack of Jarid. The Hardened Brigand gets 10 things to shoot with its woodland javelin, so I think it definitely maintains that high level of quality there in that skirmish cav or self-appointed skirmish cav category. Now our last unit to bookend the tier 4 category for Sturgians is the Sturgian Archer. And just like the Spearman, this is definitely ranked low, and it suffers from the exact same situation that the Sturgian Hunter had. Low tier bow with a low tier arrow. The barbed arrows rear their ugly head again, and the Nordic short bow makes this the lowest tier bow in the entire category. Everything else gets tier 5 and 6. So the Sturgian Archer, I mean, it's nice that it gets 2 stacks of barbed arrows, which is cool. And it does, you know, have 100 bow, 100 riding, which I think is supposed to be 100 athletics, and 100 one-handed. But again, the issue is that other things in this class have either better armor and perform better on their actual purpose, which is archery, or they just outperform this in every other way possible. So unfortunately, the tier 4 for Sturgia again kind of suffers. You go from this tier 2, which is very low, tier 3, which has some low points, but mainly a good one with the Sturgian soldier. And you come into tier 4 when your bookend with your 2 major infantry portions being completely garbage, and your shock troops being really good, and your mounted javelin cavalry being awesome. So there is a bit of an issue here with the Sturgian infantry, but let's see how this progresses into the 5th tier for Sturgia. So tier 5 for Sturgia is pretty interesting because we get 2 two-handed shock troop style characters, and one of them is called the Sturgian shock troop. Now, if you remember my video that I did on my best in class units, I had the shock troop up there. I thought it was amazing back in the day, but it has since lost its shield, and with that, a lot of its staying power. So now if you're building an army of Sturgians, the shock troop is something that you're only going to build into after you have enough veteran warriors to maintain a nice shield wall. They're really not something you want to make right out the gate. As soon as the spearman can get to up to a nice rank, you're not going to jump it into a shock troop because its survivability is so much lower. It does have a lot of really good armor though. You know, it has 48 body armor, 45 head armor, and this changes only only a little bit here with this swaparoo with the scarf. But the big issue is that without that shield, the survivability is low, but it still has a War Razor, allowing it to do a ton of damage to cavalry. If you were to charge elite cataphracts into shock troops, it's going to change a little bit now because they don't have shields, but they will still be able to output so much damage. They have 155 cut on these bad boys, and they can really, really, really dish it out. So I would give them a mid rank just because the other portion of the shock troops in this category are just so much better by comparison, but they still will outperform some of the lower ranked shock troops by comparison. Now, the other option for the spearman is the veteran warrior. And the veteran warrior is good, not amazing, but really good. It's really solid. And I think that that's all it really needs to be. It doesn't need to be this amazing beater of worlds that I'd say the veteran sergeant is. The veteran sergeant for Vlandia is so strong because it gets access to hammers, it gets access to two-handed weapons and pole arms. It has a nice kit. The veteran warrior does as well. It gets the broad blade javelin, so it is one of the very few tier 5 infantry units that retains good throwing capability. So it still has that, and it has 130 throwing, which is better than almost any other throwing unit in its category as far as a line infantry unit that also has throwing capabilities. Nice 130 athletics and 130 one-handed. So just to give you a frame of reference, taking a look at throwing here, because of his skill, he gets 7.8 accuracy, damage, and 9.1% thrown weapon speed. If I were to bring up a Khazate Darkhand by comparison, who I believe still has Jarid back, Eastern Javelin, his skill is only 60, so you can see that is just 3.6, 3.6, and 4.2. So that's just to kind of put the throwing skill into a frame of reference because he has double the throwing skill, if not a little bit more actually. So it does allow his javelins to do a little bit more punch. In addition, he has a nice big heavy round shield. It's going to create a great shield wall, and he gets the veteran warrior's axe. While being a tier 5 axe and not a tier 6 axe, it still does allow him to do a good amount of damage against enemy shields, against enemy armor, because it has that weird kind of hybrid between being a sword and being a mace. It still seems to do a lot of damage towards armor, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how that works, but it also has a great amount of armor too, with some of the best heavy armor across the category. So while the veteran warrior doesn't have a massive damage output, I think it's a very solid and very strong frontline unit, giving it a nice mid rank. Moving over to the other shock infantry, we get the Sturgian Ulfhednar. Now, I've talked about these guys a ton in the Aserai video, and they are really amazing here. I give them a high rank because they've got the best skills in class at 152 handed, 150 athletics, so they're just outrunning the competition, and also 130 throwing. Everyone else pretty much loses that throwing capability, or it's a very watered down number. So they have really nice northern throwing axes that they can launch down range, and they get drilled two-handed axes, which still do quite a bit of damage. The big problem here is they do lose their one-handed capability, but that's okay for the damage and skill trade-off, I'd say. Also, they have a lot of armor. The only thing that can outclass these guys armor-wise is, again, the Manavliaton for the Imperial, which has like 90 armor across the board. It's not really, but it still has a ton of armor. So, Ulfhednar, high rank, 100%. Now, the Sturgian Horse Raider is another really great unit for Sturgia, just following in suit with the Hardened Brigand. There's only one other non-noble line javelin cavalry unit in the game, and at this point at tier 5, and it is the Battanian mounted skirmisher. And this guy, I think, just outperforms him on so many levels. He's got good high armor. He has a really great horse here in the Sturgian Hunter. I believe the other one just has a Battanian war pony. And he also gets a lot of stacks here. He gets these 2 broad javelins. I think, yeah, this is the one with the fish harpoon is the other one. Index here is the same set of javelins. And on addition to that, he also has really good combat capability. I mean, he's got a nice sword, he's got a nice round shield, he takes on all the characteristics of the Hardened Brigand, but brings in a little bit more heavy hitting power because he's got an increase to his skills. He's got a much faster mount than the Brigand as well, with the Hunter being an up kick from the Trotter. So I think that the Horse Raider here is a high-ranked mounted cavalry unit, because it's very, there's only one other one that's not the Ferris, but the Ferris, of course, is always going to take that cake because it has so much viability across a lot of different facets. It's basically, like I said earlier, a mounted heavy knight with throwing weapons. So the last portion of the Sturgian military, and for tier 5, is the Sturgian veteran bowman. Now, everything in tier 5 is performed pretty well, right? We've got a mid rank here on the shock troop, a mid on the veteran warrior, a high rank on the Ulfhednar, and a high rank on the horse raider. But the veteran bowman suffers from the same thing that the previous 2 tiers suffered from. It is ranked abysmally low because you're dealing, again, with a low tier bow and low tier arrows. These are the same arrows that the Sturgian hunter uses. This is the barbed arrows at weapon tier 2. The only other unit or ranged unit that gets this kind of treatment is the Khazate archer, which maintains its step arrows throughout all of its tiers, but those are tier 3 arrows the entire way. So sure, there's balanced out by having tier 6 bows almost every single time, but they get at least tier 3 arrows, and the arrows have a lot of damage in them and a lot of good stack on them, so they can shoot a lot of arrows. So there's just so many bad things about the veteran bowman. In addition to that, he's got the lowest bow skill of any other archer. So the veteran bowman is just a huge drain upon your resources as a Sturgian. I mean, if you're playing a Sturgian playthrough, you're better off just jumping over to the Northern Empire and picking up Palatine Guard. Just make Imperial recruits into archers and push them through that tree. You're way better off doing that than suffering through the Sturgian veteran bowman, which is, in all honesty, the worst archer in the game. So it's an unfortunate situation here, but I still think that the thing that is the mainstay of Sturgia is supposed to be its infantry front line. And I think it pulls it off, if only just barely, to be totally honest, though. The Sturgian veteran warrior has a really great ability to hold the line, which you use your shock troops to help threaten against cavalry. You use your Ulfhednar to really bring a massive punch to the front line by having them maybe flank on the left or right portions of it. I think that that is how you're supposed to use the Sturgian infantry, is to supplement what you've got with the veteran warrior in some of these other portions of it, especially even the horse raider that can do a lot of damage. But there's one last portion of the Sturgian military we have to talk about, and that is the noble line. So let's switch over to that next. Here we are with the noble line for Sturgia, and honestly, if you're taking a look at this line, this is the way the infantry for Sturgia should be, especially at tier 2, 3, and 4. I mean, the interesting thing about the noble line for Sturgia, though, is that it's a hybrid line. It starts for 3 tiers as infantry and then progresses to heavy cavalry in the end. So it's kind of got an awkward place compared to almost to the rest of the noble lines, which are all one unit type for the entirety of it, with the exception of maybe the Ferris, which gains the ability to become a little more of a ranged knight than it was in the previous tiers. But looking through this one, you can see the stat line I would like to see on some of the other Sturgian units. But the biggest issue I will say with the Sturgian noble line is that it has such a limited amount of availability. It is so hard to actually find any of the warrior sons, the Varyag or the Varyag veterans across the map. I find that anytime I've tried to do a set playthrough, let me see if I actually have any in this guy right here. Yeah, I've got 3 warrior sons that it took me forever to find. So it's really a challenge to find these guys for Sturgia because their nation just gets destroyed so fast. And because they're into so many wars, those units are constantly being drained for the AI. So take a lot of what I'm about to say as in a vacuum, because like I said, you're probably not going to be able to field Druzanik in any real capacity because of their scarcity. But again, Sturgian warrior sons are very solid, especially for tier 2. They get a nice amount of weapons, they get good armor, still not amazing. They're kind of still in line with the tier 2 Sturgian warrior, but they're at least a better Sturgian warrior. Now, when I jump over here to the Varyag, I start to get a really nice, really strong tier 3 infantry unit. I mean, this stat line is amazing by comparison to the rest of the tier 3 units. And I also get throwing weapons. So you can see that this character has 100 one-handed, which is really, really strong at tier 3, 70 throwing, and, well, 70 riding, but 60 athletics. So this character, again, is a very good, strong frontline character. I would almost rather see the Variag be or have his equipment attached to the baseline for Sturgia and have all of this noble line be just cavalry, something like that, to kind of give that front line a little bit more staying power. But as we move down to the Variag veteran, we get a much stronger veteran than the tier 4. Remember that tier 4 who only had 20 pitiful armor? Well, this guy, he has very little variance too. He even gets a really huge round shield on one of his variants. And that's another thing, like I said, all these guys for the most part are pretty much the same. But the veteran's got a good war sword here, 69 cut damage, nice Norse round shield, and again he retains that throwing damage, and he gets a pole arm just like his Variag. The Variag did not. He gains a pole arm at rank 4, which is nice, or I'm sorry, tier 4, which is nice. So you start to get this character now that has a lot more going for it. But now we get into the heavy cav portion for this noble line, the Druznik. Now this character is pretty scary. For one, at tier 5, he has incredible stats. Like, he's got a really, really good armor. He's got a really good, nice a loadout of weaponry. And the issue here, though, is that jumping from tier 5 to 6, there's not much of a change. He does have a nice Sturgian hunter, which is a great horse here. But he's just kind of good. Like, he's solid. And he of course is kind of outclassed by Vlandia and by the Empire in a lot of ways. But I think that the issue here is now when we jump down to the Sturgian Druznik champion, we're not dealing with a character that is that vastly different. And that's my problem here. So take a look, right? 42, 60, 36. 45, 60, 42. So you're dealing with a character that's really not that huge of a jump from tier 5 to tier 6. And the loadout barely changes. He swaps from using an axe to a sword, and that's it. So that's, I think, my big problem with the Druznik champion is not only are they scarce, but at tier 6, they just don't have as huge of a progression from tier 5. I do think that they're better at tier 6 than tier 5. They still have a Sturgian hunter, which is unfortunate, but they have better armor, at least a little bit more. But how does the Druznik champion compare to the other two heavy cav options, right? When we take a look at the Banner Knight, that's one of them, or if we took a look at the Elite Cataphract, that's the other. Well, it's very interesting because the Banner Knight and the Druznik champion are a little bit more similar. They both have lances, they both have round shields, and they both have a sword to follow up with that. When we take a look at the Cataphract has a two-handed Imperial Lance. So it cannot couch its lance like the other two can. And I honestly look at that as a detractor, because it also cannot keep its shield up while it does this. It does have a nice amount of body armor, and that kind of makes up for it, right? It's the heaviest of all the heavy cav in the game. It has the highest armor values. But I think that the Banner Knight does shine a little bit more because of its Vlandian lance, its kite shield, and a ridged arming sword. And again, I think the Druznik champion kind of outperforms it just a little bit because of that ability to keep its shield up and its spear. So I'm actually going to give a rank to the champion of mid rank. Not high, because I think that there's also I want to see more out of the Druznik champion by compared to the Druznik. And on top of it, the Fullard Narrow Warsword only has a length of 89, whereas the other two get a length over 110 on both. They have a Paramirian, and they get an arming sword. I guess the trade-off here, though, is the Druznik champion has a handling of 98. And what that means is the likelihood to do max damage is a larger interval for the champion than it is for the other two. So there's nothing really that makes the Druznik champion outshine the other two, but there's nothing that really pushes it down to the mud. So I definitely have to give the Druznik champion a mid rank. Let's recap. Here is the units that we've ranked from low to high across this entire video. And you can really see, right, that there are some definite issues with Sturgians units. And I think that the biggest, most glaring issue here is in the Sturgian Spearman. That shouldn't be a low. If anything, it should be just a mid-rank. Give it some sort of nice mid-ground staying power to now use the Sturgian Berserker to really lend a lot of punch to the military. I think that that is probably the weakest or biggest issue when I look at Sturgia's units as a whole. In addition to that too, I think that the Sturgian warrior doesn't need to be as terrible as it is. The woodsman, I'm okay with it, I guess, being low ranked, and having the hunter, archer, and bowman being low ranked, I don't have as much of a problem with it because I want Sturgia to rely more on its infantry. And right now, especially when it comes to the AI does not get a chance to rely on the infantry because it cannot push beyond the warrior category or even the spearman category because they just get completely destroyed by Vlandia or by Khazate or by the Northern Empire. There's just so many better units by comparison, especially when you talk about the Empire, whose units are probably high tier across the board when it comes to their infantry, all the way down to the legionary. And even when you're looking at Khazate, which has so many horse archers, and the best way to combat horse archers is with archers. Or if you're taking a look at Vlandia, who has access to an amazing amount of cavalry, and the best way to counter that cavalry is going to be spearmen, which are not really strong for Vlandia, or I'm sorry, for Sturgia. So I think Sturgia still needs some love. It did get a nice pass 2 patches ago, but it still needs more tweaking. There are still some issues with the skill values on some of the units, especially in the archer and the veteran bowman, having higher riding than they do actual athletics. And I think that having some of the tier loadouts as far as their weapons go or their armor goes for all of the infantry really makes Sturgia an army that just needs a lot of love right now. So hopefully you enjoyed this video on the Sturgian military and a unit guide to it, and it gave you an idea of what units you can kind of sub out from your military. If I were to make a Sturgian playthrough, like I said earlier, I would probably not focus on the Sturgian hunter, archer, or veteran bowman at all. In fact, I wouldn't even focus on the Druzinik. I'd probably go and grab something from Vlandia or from the Empire to at least get a better shock cav unit in there, or at least one that has a little bit more prevalent than the Druzinik's very waning presence on the map. So again, hopefully you enjoyed this video here today, and if there are other or whatever the next faction you'd like to talk about, please go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Say, hey, you know, I really want to hear about Vlandia. What's their current state? Let's talk about Empire. Let's talk about Britannia, Khazate. We still have more to talk about, but we might be getting a patch any day now that might segue this conversation or at least change some stuff. So let's take a look here in the future to hopefully get a patch and update to some things to at least get a better take on some of these units that do strongly need some love. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below. And if you do like, please go ahead and slap that little bell icon and turn on all notifications. That way you can find out about all of my giveaway streams, about my lore videos that I put up, any more of my Bannerlord guides, all sorts of goodies. But as always, have a good one and take care.